Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of I'm Not Crazy, but I am Dr. Rhonda Mattox, fellowship trained and psychiatrist and host of I'm Not Crazy, but family. On this edition, we have an amazing guest with us who is going to help us think through biases in medicine in all forms and how that can cause us to feel dismissed. As I go on to introduce our all-star cast, you know what to do, and that is rep your city. Tell us where you are calling in from, and share with your friends. Now, you know we have an old pro with this. One of my favorites, producer, former therapist, Ellis Dean, and we also have with us Dr. Angela Marshall, who went from engineer to physician and now to author. She is a dedicated physician, successful author, and a powerful voice for change in the healthcare industry. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, family, and please welcome her to the virtual lectern. How are you all doing today?
We're doing great.
Good. Now, the uncomfortable truth is that race, gender, sexual orientation, age, body size, income, and a whole host of cultural factors can have a significant impact on whether you're diagnosed accurately, whether you're treated correctly. The good news is that with some pointers, you can at least understand that those red flags that you're getting are not just you being sensitive. Maybe it really is happening. And we have our guests here today to tell us what we can do when we see those things happening. So I'll start with you, Dr. Marshall. What made you go from physician, busy, ridiculous schedule to author who thought this was an important enough topic for you to come in, get off from work, and then put in the time? Because I know your schedule, and I know that it had to take a tremendous amount of effort to author something like this. So what was that catalyst that drew you into, I need to author this book?
Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for asking that question. My inspiration for writing this book really came after having several conversations with my patients. And, a lot of my patients would say things like their doctors didn't listen to them, or they'd feel dismissed by the healthcare system. And I've had my own examples of feeling not listened to or dismissed at times. And so I felt that I was just hearing it too much from too many patients. And they happened to be, patients that were brown skinned like me, or, women. There are other factors that I noticed that seemed to play into those feelings, but I felt it was something that needed to be addressed.
Absolutely. And when you're saying dismissed, what do you mean? And how does that look in the practice of medicine when you're on the patient side? What does that look and feel like?
Yeah, and so feeling dismissed is, I came up with this title because it kind of describes how people feel when they're not getting what they need. And, the interesting thing is when patients go to see doctors, we're in a very vulnerable state, right? So patients are in their most vulnerable state. And so they're asking for help. And so when you're vulnerable and asking for help and not being listened to or not getting what you need, then, that's very problematic, especially in the healthcare setting.
Mm-hmm. And I see you nodding, Ellis, like you want to add something to that.
No, I was thinking about, I was drawing that parallel about being dismissed or not being listened to. That crosses all wakes of life, whether it's personal or professional. If you're in a relationship, if you feel like you're not being heard or you feel like you're being dismissed, there's going to be some problems. I think the challenge is when we're talking about healthcare is that the doctor is such in a position of authority. And so much like if you feel like you're not being heard by your boss, you might be frustrated, but you can put your head down and keep moving on. But when you're in healthcare, I think patients don't realize the power that they have, and that's why I appreciate you writing this book. Patients don't appreciate the power that they have because you should be driving that appointment. Yes, the doctor is the source of authority. Yes, they have a lot of knowledge and skills and abilities and can teach you about your body. But you are the most important person when it comes to your healthcare, and you are the person that has the most knowledge about your body because you're in it every day. And so, I think books like yours will help people reclaim that power and become a better partner when they go into their healthcare visits.
Mhm. Sometimes when we are talking about being dismissed, people will automatically go to this is racist or whatever. One of the things that I will say is, as I listen to people tell me what their experiences are, I realize sometimes that what is happening is the patient tells the doctor something, and sometimes the doctor processes all of this stuff in their head, but doesn't tell the patient what they're thinking. And then the next statement sounds like, "Did you even hear what I said?" For instance, a patient described having sciatica, and then she was concerned because the person was only talking about her losing weight. Well, what he didn't say was, perhaps your size is contributing to this unnecessarily, and didn't give those few, like, this is why I'm talking about your weight, such that it didn't feel good. Are you all able to hear me okay? So
You're in and out. It's like riding a roller coaster. Like you come in and it's really really fast, and then you cut off.
I'm gonna bounce out and come back in, and you keep talking, okay?
Gotcha. So what about that, Dr. Marshall? When you're talking about and what I heard from Dr. Maddox is sometimes when you are in an appointment and as a patient you tell your doctor one thing and then the doctor starts talking about something else. Now the doctor knows that that might be related. So she was trying to make the point about sciatica, and the doctor starts talking to the patient about losing weight. Well, the doctor knows that there is a correlation between that pressing, having extra weight is going to press on that sciatic nerve that runs down the leg. And so if you lose weight, you can kind of alleviate some of the sciatic symptoms. However, the patient might be receiving, you're not listening to me. I'm talking about sciatic pain in my leg and not about my weight. And so there could be a tendency if that uh, miscommunication is not corrected, then that patient might not feel that they're getting the best medical care. They may not come back to the doctor's office. They may not be kind of as adherent to their treatment plan as possible because they're like, well, the doctor didn't hear me. They give me this stuff about losing weight. I'm talking about pain in my leg. And so, how do we get providers as well as patients to get more in alignment with that communication?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, the audio is going in and out, but I heard part of what you asked, and you're so right in that, there's a lot of big victim blaming that goes on in the healthcare setting, and so one of the factors that I talk about in my book is obesity. And when patients happen to be overweight, sometimes no matter what they complain about, it always boils down to, well, you just need to lose weight. And of course, everything is not related to being overweight. And so, and I think, the biggest driver here is when there's a lack of racial or cultural competency on the part of the doctor, or just a lack of seeing the patient as a human and being able to connect with the patient as a human. I think that is part of the challenge. You're right. When the patient comes in to see their doctor, they're very vulnerable. The doctor is in a position of so-called power, and but it's so important for them to be able to connect with their patient and to be able to really, really hear and listen to their concerns in order to help them heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how does the patient reclaim their power after that?
I think one of the things that we can do as patients is, number one, we need to know what the standard of care is for the things that we're complaining about. Because sometimes we go in and, there's a disconnect. You get one thing if you look a certain way, and you get another thing if you And so I think for one, it's important to know what is the standard of care, because when we arm ourselves with information, then we're able to call doctors out and say, hey, according to the CDC, it says that I should be getting this. Why are you not offering that to me? And so that's the other piece. But then also, I think it's really important for patients to vet their doctors. You know,
Yes.
sometimes we spend more time researching our hairdressers and our nail salons than we do in finding our doctors. And so being able to find doctors that we can connect with, and credentials are important also, but it's not just the credentials. That's the basic need that we have, but we also want to make sure that they can look us in the eye, they can talk to us, they can call us by name, we can feel comfortable sharing our most vulnerable specifics about our health. And it's just so important for us to make sure we take that time to carefully choose the people that we're entrusting our care to.
Absolutely. And when they come into the room, you know, many times you can tell how this is going to go. Are they still standing, or do they sit down? Do they make eye contact? Do they talk with you? Are they just typing the whole time that you're on in there, or whatever? Those types of things. Is it considered rude to say to your doctor, "I want you to look me in the eyes"? Is that rude?
I will say it's probably not rude, but I would think the cultural competence piece of that is that a part of Black culture, as we're waiting for our guests to rejoin us, um, is we looking somebody in the eye is not considered disrespectful, or not looking somebody in the eye is not considered disrespectful in Black culture because of our existence here in this country. We haven't been allowed to look someone in the eye, and if there was times where if you looked, a white person in the eye, you, there could be some severe and violent consequences as a result. And so when we're talking about eye contact, that could be a miscommunication between both the doctor and the patient. You might have a doctor that's of another culture or ethnicity that might take a patient, not looking them in the eye, as them being disingenuous or lying or hiding something, when that's just part of Black culture, and vice versa. Or if you have a if you ask somebody to look you in the eye, or the doctor asks the patient to look in the eye, that could be seen as being aggressive. Um, so we always have to make sure that we're including the cultural norms and the cultural competencies to make sure that that communication is clear and understood, equally on both sides.
I think that is in part why sometimes
Yeah.
what they call physician-patient concordance is so
Yep.
important, because a lot of the literature shows that when you look like you're a physician, when you all share some of the same culture, the same history, the patient satisfaction rate goes up. And with increased communication, many times goes very, very good understanding of what's going on and how you should proceed. So making it a point to prioritize that piece of, if you can find someone who looks like you or shares your values, is really good. Um, Dr. Marshall, as we are navigating this piece with, what would you talk, what would you tell patients to do if they're feeling like they've reached the end of the road? How do they know they've reached the end of the road and this is not working? And what to do when they reach the end of the road?
Can you repeat the question for me, Dr. Maddox?
Certainly.
You're
When
breaking up a little bit.
Absolutely, as you were navigating the conversations with your doctors and you realize this is not going to work, what are some of those signs that this truly is not going to work? Um, and how do you navigate that after you decide
Well,
this? Hey,
for
wow.
one, sure. For one, I think we have to make sure that we find our voice in the exam room. So, yes, the doctor has the power, but we are the patient, and we have to claim our power. And so being able to call them out and say, hey, I don't feel heard today. I don't feel that you're really understanding what I'm saying. And being able to use what we call I statements, because I statements are non confrontational, they're respectful, but you're really just sharing how you feel. And so I think it's really important to get in the habit of sharing when you do feel like you're not being heard or you feel like you're being dismissed, being able to speak up and start a dialogue with your doctor about that. And then if you speak up and you're still not getting what you need, then it may be time to move on. Um, I know that we have a healthcare crisis in terms of access and shortage of physicians, but if they're not serving your needs, then you just have to keep looking.
Mm. Ellis, any additional?
I, I think I think that the challenge, and I'm trying to stand in the gap for the patients in this space, but I think the challenge is um, what I would suggest that healthcare doesn't understand is that it's already been a process to get to you, right? To get to that one doctor. And so you get there and you don't want to go through that process again. And even though that relationship might not be the best, the communication might not be the best, what's holding us there, what's keeping us there is knowing we don't want to go through that process again of having to find, looking at finding somebody that's closer to you, finding an appointment that fits in your schedule, all of that process that goes into getting an appointment. We don't want to go through that again. And so sometimes we do sacrifice ourselves. We do mute our voices a little bit and give away some of that power just because we don't want to go through that process again. Because frankly, a lot of us don't want to go to the doctor, right? So, because, you know, especially as we get older, there tends to be more bad news than good news sometimes when you go to the doctor. And so, not only do you have to go there, but you might have some bad communication. It can make it all bad. So we do have to be cognizant of that point, um, and find in reclaiming our power. I do think as patients we have to do a better job of saying, you know what, I'd rather go through that process again than stick it out with somebody that I'm not happy with or that I'm not comfortable um, being as vulnerable as I need to be with my healthcare provider.
Absolutely. And I think the
Yeah,
signal is,
that's
go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Marshall.
Go ahead, Dr. Mark.
oh no, going to say that's so true in that, not only does it take time to find a physician or find a provider, but then, oftentimes you're scheduling way in advance because there is such an access issue. And so I think, when we are picking our providers, having someone, of course, who has the credentials, because that's non negotiable, but also someone who can listen to you. I just can't stress that enough. Knowing that they are hearing you, they're listening to you, I think that's just a really important trait that you want to look for in your providers.
Mm, absolutely, absolutely. So we had a guest who said she's been doing this for years and not able to find her doctor. What are your recommendations for her?
I'll put it on screen so you can see it there, Dr. Marshall. So this is from Trinita Williams, and she's saying, I've been struggling for years trying to be heard by physicians. It's so exhausting. I stopped making appointments. You know, what would you say to her to
Tornita,
reclaim that power?
yes, Tornita, thank you for your question because that is something that I see often also, especially in our community, is when you don't get what you need, then we just disengage from doctors and from healthcare altogether. I do think that is such a dangerous place to be because then we run the risk of not getting the care that we need just because the system is not giving us. So, Tornita, I really encourage you to don't give up, keep looking and keep working and pressing until you find someone that you can connect with. I will say that Black doctors are a great place to start. And I know blackdoctor.org has a physician referral resource. And the research says that Black patients do better when they're cared for by Black doctors. And so I think that's a good place to start. Also, we need more Black doctors because currently we only have about 5% of the doctors are Black in this country, whereas we make up 12 to 13% of the population. And so we need to encourage our youth to pursue careers in medicine because, again, we get better care when we're cared for by Black doctors.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Marshall, in your book, Dismissed, Tackling the Biases That Undermine Our Health Care, you talked to people about trusting your instincts. What does that look like?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
She was
What
saying,
does
what is trusting
what
your
does trust your
instincts?
instincts look like?
Yes, trusting your instinct or your intuition is so important when finding good providers or providers that are going to connect with you. And so I think that we have to make sure that we are, again, not just looking for credentials, but we're looking for people that we're really going to connect with. And, I've seen situations where patients have not felt like they were cared for by a physician, and then I checked the medical documentation that that same physician has written about the patient, and I've seen derogatory comments by the physician. And so when you feel that way, it's usually for a reason. And so we have to trust our gut when we get that feeling. I had one patient in particular who was feeling like the doctor wasn't hearing what she was saying. She was having chest pain, and the doctor kept saying that it was fine, and she didn't need any further testing. And when I read the comments that the doctor made about the patient, it was just deplorable. And so again, when we feel that way, it's usually for a reason. And so we have to believe that and use that to advocate for ourselves.
You
And I
know,
think that
and I'm sorry, in counseling,
you make a great
there's a,
point.
I think in counseling I was taught that you're supposed to have unconditional positive regard, right, for your client. Is that not something that physicians bring into the exam room with them, where they say, okay, I'm going to look at my client unconditionally positive versus, because like it's just amazing to me that you would put derogatory comments on a patient's permanent medical record that's going to follow them even if they're not with you. And so that seems to be a bit troubling to see that that's happening.
And I think it speaks to the fact that you should
I agree. And
definitely.
one of my, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Marshall.
You go,
I agree. This is supposed to be a no judgment zone and an unconditional appreciation zone. And so, we're supposed to treat everyone with respect and treat everyone with care and compassion. But in the reality, that's not what often happens. And often you have the haves and the have nots, and people treat patients differently depending on what they look like, or, whether they're, brown skin, or whether they're obese, whether they're older, whether they have certain conditions, chronic pain, mental illness, all these factors play in. And so I think as physicians, we have to be aware of the many biases that we have and make sure that we're constantly addressing that and making sure that we're treating everyone fairly and with respect and compassion.
excellent points. I think that what you're saying speaks to the point that we really need to make sure we're signed on to our patient electronic records and that we're watching what's being put into our records. Would you agree? All right. So, as
Yeah, so Dr. Marshall, the question was, I think as a way for patients to claim their superpower back in those situations is that they need to pay more attention to to their electronic patient records. And so now that a lot of offices, you can kind of pull up your record and see what the doctor has said, see what the doctor has written about your visit. And so that might be, is that something that you would advise patients to start doing? Is like when you get that email that says, here's a record of your event, here's of your visit, go back, look at it and see what the doctor wrote to make sure that there's congruence in how you perceive the visit and how the doctor perceived the visit.
Exactly, because in this particular case, the patient or the doctor made comments about this patient's eating fried chicken and bacon every day and has gained a tremendous amount of weight and is not following any of my recommendations. Those are the kinds of statements that she made in this patient's chart. And so what it does is it paints the patient as non-compliant, and this follows the patient when she goes to see other physicians, right? And so if this is in your record that you're not following medical advice, or you're not taking care of yourself, or you're not caring enough to follow our recommendations, then that creates bias in the next provider that sees them. And so it is really important to ask for copies of your visit notes after you see a doctor. When you're in the hospital, ask for your discharge summary, see what's been written about you. And even just to have it for your own records is important, especially as you're going to see other doctors. It's helpful to be able to have those records with you.
So Dr. Mark, so wouldn't that also impact the next physician or the next doctor in terms of when you're needing a prescription? Doesn't that impact also what medicines they prescribe for you? You might not get the better medications if they feel like you're not going to be adherent, or they feel like you're not a good patient to their treatment plan. Based on that bias, they'll say, okay, we're going to give you this one because, just to satisfy, versus getting you something that could be better for you and your condition.
Yes, that's a great point. And in fact, this, and not to harp on the same example, but this
Right.
woman that I was seeing, she was having chest pain. And I kept saying, you've got to go back to your cardiologist. I want you to get a stress test. And she kept coming back. And I'd say, did you get your stress test? She says, no. And I said, well, why are you not getting a stress test? Did you tell your doctor? She says, yeah. She said, I didn't need it. And so I
Oh,
said,
wow.
finally, I said, well, let me request the record. And when I requested the record from the doctor, I read all these derogatory comments she made. But the most important thing is, she said at the end, is that I find no reason to do a stress test in this patient because she's not following any recommendations, which I've never
Mm,
heard before, but never heard that. And that is not a reason to not do a stress test. And so I told the patient, I showed her what it said, and I told her, we are not seeing this doctor again. I immediately called up a friend of mine who's a cardiologist, introduced her, shared the story. She says, oh, she needed a stress test like yesterday. And thankfully that doctor took the patient. But it's those kinds of things. And I think having a primary care doctor who can advocate on your behalf, because
yes.
sometimes as a patient, advocating for yourself, you can feel very limited. But if you have a strong primary care doctor who looks like you, who can advocate for you, that is also a very powerful tool for your health.
How common is this, would you think? How common is it that this kind of stuff happens? Are these isolated incidents,
Yeah, it
or is this?
happens so often.
Go ahead,
I
Dr.
can't
Marshall.
tell you how many times I had to jump on the phone and call other doctors to advocate for my patients.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. So when
So
this is happening and you feel like your doctor is not hearing from you, you said in your book, to basically use your voice and champion for yourself. What are some of those strategies for the people who feel like, particularly in the older generation, that the doctor knows best, and so if the doctor says no, they don't do it.
oh wow, okay, yeah, she was on mute, I guess. So I think I'm going to add another point to when she was talking about what was on that patient's record. The other thing is that what she wrote in that record also goes to insurance. If that patient was using insurance to pay for that visit, and so when that if that doctor writes, "Oh, patient is non-adherent, does I don't recommend a stress test," then if she, that could impact her ability to pay for the next cardiologist to get the stress test. Because they say, "Oh, you feel like you just doctor hopping," and insurance is always looking for a reason not to pay. We know that. I'll say that. I know y'all can't say that because I'll say it. They're always looking for a reason not to pay, and so having something like that on your record when you know your insurance company is going to look at it can be a detriment to you getting treatment and getting treatments paid for in the future, and then that means you're going to be coming out of pocket for really expensive medical procedures.
Great point.
Yes. And I wanted to point out the intersectionality of some of these factors. For example, I had another patient of mine who happened to be African American. She was a woman and she was obese and she had anxiety and she was having shortness of breath. And so I sent her to the first cardiologist and he told her there was nothing wrong with her, that she just needed to lose weight, exercise and lose weight. She sent her to another cardiologist. He told her, "Oh, it's just because you're anxious. You need to do some transcendental meditation to, help you breathe better." Like literally, you can't make this up, right? And so then I wasn't satisfied. So then the third time I said, "You know what? I'm going to get on the phone and call my cardiologist." This is another female cardiologist. And that's one of the great things about being in DC is we have so many great black doctors in this area. And I just pick up the phone and call someone. So I called another black woman cardiologist. I said, "Hey, look, this woman is having shortness of breath." And I try not to lead the doctors. I just share the facts. And same thing. She said, "Oh, well, this woman needs a stress test like right away." And so she got her in. Lo and behold, this patient had one of her arteries in her heart was 95% blocked. So if she had exercised like the first doctor recommended, she could have died. And, and so these are the kinds of things that we see. It's the weight, it's the mental health, anxiety, depression. And so we really have to make sure that we're looking out for ourselves, advocating for ourselves, but also if what they're recommending doesn't seem right, being able to get a second opinion. I think that's an important thing that we can do as well.
But will insurance
Yeah,
companies
I
pay
think
for?
it's
Will insurance companies pay for the second opinion?
Oh, yes, they do. They do. Contrary to what most people know, most of the time they do pay for second opinions for you to see another for the exact same thing.
absolutely.
Ellis?
No, I was just going to say that I think from there's two words that one of them came up earlier when we're talking about competency, but we're also talking about health literacy, right? And so from a patient standpoint, the more you understand about healthcare in general, the better chance you're going to have a positive experience with your healthcare provider. What do I mean by that? Well, we there is about 230 plus conditions that are associated with obesity. And so when you start coming in for this condition or that condition, it could lead back to obesity. So when your doctor starts talking to you about losing weight, you say, hey, what the doctors need to do is say, hey, look, give them that information and say, when I talk to you about losing weight, it's because all of these things be tied back to obesity. And so you losing weight can not only help this one condition that you came in here for, but it could also alleviate the fact that your blood pressure is a little high, your cholesterol is high, blah, blah, blah. And then just that simple explanation that takes 10 to 15 seconds can make that patient feel better versus saying, I'm here for sciatica and you're talking to me about losing weight, you're not listening to me. And so I think the understanding so that literacy and just really the doctors having a little bit better bedside manner can go a long way. I'm trying to be happy. I'm trying to be. Cause I need doctors here. Cause it's part of my job. I got to talk to y'all. So they start turning me down by telling y'all do a bad job. But it gets a little bit better. At bedside manner could go a long way in terms of improving the overall health. The last thing I would say is that bias up against black women, right? And talking about, and just in that specific example, we're talking about cardiovascular health. Cardiovascular disease in women, the symptoms show up differently than they do in men, right? And so we have to recognize, so doctors have to understand that distinction, right? And then we've got to get over that bias of black women in terms of their experiencing of pain, their reporting. All of these things come into play that could have cost that woman really, literally her life if she had just gone with that first opinion and said, oh, I'm just stressed. I need to drink a little ginger ale and my chest pain to go away. No, ginger ale can't fix everything, okay? All right, it's for stomach upset and gas. Y'all know that. What y'all grandmama told y'all.
Right.
Okay, it can't fix everything. So we got to do a better job of getting clear and being more literate as a consumer side. We've got to be more literate, but on the provider side, you've got to have a little bit more patience. And I know it's 12 minutes. I understand managed care, 12 minutes, but what I just told you was 15 seconds that can change that appointment and could
Mhm.
change the viewpoint of that patient of how you're interacting with them.
Absolutely.
And I want you to be pushy when you go to your doctor's office. I need you to be pushy and assertive and say, I heard what you said the last time I tried it, it did not work. And if they tell you they're not going to do something that you think should be done, ask them to document why they're not wanting to do that. And many times I've heard patients say, when they ask, will you document that I've made that request and what your rationale is for denying it, then the doctors will revisit, kind of that or whatever. And we are part of the physician community, so we don't want you to think physicians are awful. But what we do realize is that sometimes you go in and you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, you don't feel valued, and we're already at a disadvantage in terms of health. And when you have that experience and you're triggered and don't want to go back, you're not hurting them by not going to the doctor. You may be hurt at all. You're hurting you. So we want you to have strategies in the end
Look,
that you can use to negotiate for your health.
well, as they say in the community, listen. What um what I'm gonna say is this: physicians are people, and people can be lazy at their job, okay? And so this is their job, and so they go do the least amount of work, okay? Because you know how you are at
No,
your job. Think about how,
don't
look,
believe Ellis. Some.
okay, some.
And
I'm not.
I mean, I say that because I found myself being a case manager for these folks. I'm going over. So there are some who have checked out.
Yeah,
Yes. But when you pick up that they check out, you check out and check into somebody's doctor's office.
that's so true. That's true. And some of it is what I call critter state. Is like when people don't have their basic needs being met, or, people are frustrated by paperwork and, overly bureaucratic, payment models and, healthcare in general. I hate to say it, it's just broken. And so,
Mhm.
not to make any excuses for physicians, but, certainly physicians have bad days too, but it's no excuse because we are called to this mission of healing and caring for people. And so, there may be times when I don't feel my best or I don't feel up to, and those are days that I take off. If I can't come into the office and, be able to validate my patients and listen to what there's and really advocate for them and care enough for them to give them my best self, then I don't go in that day. And so I think it's important for us as physicians and also to take care of ourselves, because just like
Mhm.
any other caregiver, when you're giving all the time, you can get what we call compassion fatigue.
Woo, you said a word.
A lot of physicians are compassion fatigue, and not to make physicians the victims, but when we feel that compassion fatigue coming on, it's time for a vacation, it's time for a break. And so being able to understand that we're also not superhuman, and that it is okay for us to take breaks and take care of ourselves so that we can bring our best selves to the job.
Now, my audience is uncannily quiet today. Please drop your questions in and let us know, because Dr. Angela Marshall out of Silver Springs, Maryland, we won't have access to her again next week. So go ahead and drop your questions, drop your comments, and we'll read them online since it's not very many of you talking today.
There, there's
Go ahead.
there's a whole book. We interviewed somebody last year. She wrote a book about compassion fatigue in healthcare professionals. And so what you're talking about, Dr. Marshall, is absolutely right. It is a serious thing. I think that the challenge is that with managed care, you got to see so many patients, you got to see so many this, you got to see so many that, and you don't get that time off. We do need to kind of revisit how much time off physicians are allowed and physicians can take, because there is a burden. I would say I'm defending physicians here. I know I was a bit bashful earlier, but I'm gonna come back around to the corner. I'll come back around it. But but I would say also, there is you're building up calluses to the frustration of you giving great advice and trying to help your patient get through it, and then they go home and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're not holding up their end of the bargain, and then they come back to you, doc, that didn't work. Well, what did you do? Well, were you working out? Were you exercising? Were you eating right? Did you change your diet? I gave you all of the, and then they don't do it. They just want a pill, and so there is some frustration there on the physician side that we do as patients. We've got to do a better job. That when they give you a treatment plan, follow it, like and then if you don't agree with it, get a second opinion, but don't just go home and not do it and then go back and say it didn't work. You're lying. Quit lying.
And we do too, because we know how many scripts we wrote. If I wrote a prescription and I have one refill on it, and you see me 3 months later, it matters not for you to tell me I've been taking my meds order. You should have run it out by now. Just saying. Now, and I will say, based on it. So, family, last week we got one of the shows I did a couple of weeks ago was a show where I talked about lying to my doctor, going to the ER, lying to the doctor about how much coffee I had been drinking, was having chest pain, thought I was having a heart attack in my 20s. The doctor says, asked me what medicines, and I realized, oh, you doubled your medicine without your doctor's authorization. And then how much coffee did I drink? Oh, you're drinking 2 pots. So I said 1 pot, his eyes got big, and I was like, well, maybe I should have said a half pot. So I'm in there lying to the doctor, right? And this lady who was listening in said, I lied to my doctor. And then she started telling me what was happening. So I'm going to say this to you all. I think that both parties, the docs come in sometimes, and we are behind. You showed up later, the person before you showed up later, we're behind and we're kind of rushing. But then the other piece is that you come in and you lie. Family. You got to stop all this lying. Just tell the truth.
Tell the truth, shame the devil. That's right.
Shame the devil.
Well, and that's so true. And part of the truth also is sharing when you have we talk about social determinants of health now, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
if the physician has prescribed a medicine that is beyond your budget, being able to share, say, hey, I can't afford that expensive medicine you gave me. And because sometimes as physicians, we don't know what your plan covers or what it doesn't cover, right? And so we may prescribe a medicine, we don't know your budget. And so if it's something that is difficult for you, or let's say we recommend a regimen and your work hours don't allow you to exercise 5 days a week, you work in 12-hour days. And so being able to communicate those things, that if the physician is recommending something that doesn't seem reasonable in your limitations, then it's important to share that too,
Mm.
to be able to come up with a compromised treatment plan.
Good point.
We got a good question.
Go
We got
ahead.
a good question coming in, because I want to make sure that we get our audience questions asked. So this is coming from Darian McKinney. He's asking, is it okay to get a full physical every 6 months instead of once a year? Um, Dr. Marshall?
Well, hi, Darian, and thank you for your question. Um, sometimes insurance may not cover that, but that
Mhm.
doesn't prevent you from going in and get asking for a physical. Sometimes when people say full physical, they think their annual physical that insurance companies typically cover. But the reality is, every time you go to the physician, they should be laying hands on you and listening to you, or do looking in your ears, or whatever the issue that you're complaining about. A physical exam is a part of every doctor patient interact, unless you're a psychiatrist, right, Dr. Maddox? But for the most part, we should be doing physical exams every time we see you, depending upon what you're complaining about. And so you can always ask. Again, the physician, the insurance companies may not cover it more than once a year, not a full physical, anyways.
But
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what, sir. I'm glad you want one because most black men are like, I'm not going to see the doctor for 15 years. So, sir, you go in there and you ask for what you want, and then you let them figure out how to get it paid for.
That's exactly.
I would also say if they're monitoring something like you can work around the full physical by like if you're a doctor, if like your cholesterol is low high and they're monitoring that, insurance probably will pay for that because that's something they know that they're going to end up, if you have a heart condition, they're going to end up paying more. So they'd rather have you get your lab work done every 3 months or every 6 months versus you waiting a year and something really bad happened. And so I think that in light of doing a full physical, if there's something that's monitoring or there's something that's bothering you, you can go back in for that specific thing and get it checked out. And I'm sure insurance they'll figure out a way to write that up to get it paid for.
So true.
All right. Now, for those of you who are tuning in, you're tuned in a little bit late. I'm here with Dr. Angela Marshall, who has written an amazing book, Dismissed: Tackling the Biases, about tackling biases within healthcare, and our wonderful, amazing producer, Ellis Dean. You may have missed, but I want to just restate this question again. If there are any things that you left out, how do patients take back their power when they're feeling dismissed or denied?
And again, I think it's so important to feel empowered when you go to the doctors. It may be your insurance company that's paying, but you're paying your insurance company. So you have the power, you have the purse strings, and it's your body. And you have to, if you don't advocate for yourself, who will? So it's important you are the most important advocate that you have. So just make sure that you're fighting for your most important asset.
Know the standard of care, use your voice, talk about, make ask them to document why it is that they are denying whatever your request is. Talk to other people in the community about doctors they've appreciated that have listened to them, those types of things. And if you are navigating a specialty doc, use your primary care doc as well to help you kind of decipher what is being said and make sure that what you need done is done. And then finally, just like you said, get a second opinion. And my last finally is sign up for your patient portal and look at those medical records in real time so you can know what the doctor is saying, putting in there about you, and you can challenge if you don't like what it is. Now, we've not talked about filing formal, uh, I guess, what is it, patient with patient, turning in a survey saying you're dissatisfied with whatever, or even talking to the medical board. Now, those are last ditch efforts, but when is that warranted?
Well, we use the term malpractice, and what malpractice describes is when the standard of care has not been met and you've suffered a consequence of that. So, if you've suffered a consequence to your health and your doctor didn't follow standard of care, then that constitutes malpractice. And in those situations, it's important to consult with a malpractice attorney. And sometimes it may be, you may not have to go to the point of suing. Maybe it's a point of being having the situation mediated by a mediator, or as a last ditch effort, certainly lawsuits are an option. and they should be done when indicated.
Okay. Well, we have just a few more minutes. Is there anything that we've not talked about that you wanted to share and you didn't get out? And that goes for you, Ellis, or you, Dr. Marshall.
I think the one thing that I want to stress is we need more Black doctors, and so whatever we can do to encourage our youth to pursue careers in medicine. I need to make sure I have people to take care of me when I retire. And so, 5% is just not enough. We're about 89,000 physicians short. If we represented our percentage in society, we would need 89,000 more doctors. And so we are way behind the eight ball on that. And so, whatever we can do to prepare our youth early, because you can't just decide after college you're going to, you got to start this process, in early elementary school, middle school, high school, and make sure that you're also prepared. And so as much as we can, we need to be sharing that message.
Absolutely. And we have a couple of comments. Dr. Diamond from last week says sometimes patients ask for a physical, but really have a particular interest. So the doc may need to hone in on what the problem really is that they're concerned about. We have a question from our friend Darian McKinney, and thank you so much for tuning in, Darian. What's the real difference between regular meds and generic meds? If they are supposedly the same, then why do we have such a thing called generic medications? Oh, Dr. Marshall's gonna love answering that one. That's a great question, Mr. McKinney.
That's that's a great question. And so I'll start by saying I take generic medicines. There are a couple of medications that I don't like to do generic in, but generic medicines are basically, I use the analogy of the recipe, right? If you have a special recipe that only you can make, and you tell somebody else how to make that item, then technically they should be able to make it the exact same if they follow the exact same directions. And so when pharmaceuticals come out with these medications, they have the license or the patent on that for a certain number of years. And so that means nobody else can make that medication. And it makes sense because they've invested a lot of research and development to make the medication. And so they should have a license for a certain period of time. But once that expires, then they have to publish that recipe so other companies can make it. And if they're following the exact same instructions, they're making the same medication. It might have a different color or a different coating, but it's the same medication. And so I do endorse generic medications. I take them myself. Again, there are just a couple exceptions where I don't recommend generics, but that's few. There's only about 2 or 3 medications that I don't like to do generics for.
Mm-hmm. And when you said that, I was thinking thyroid medicine for sure. What are the 2 or 3 so that whoever's listening can hear? What 2 or 3 do you not like?
That's exactly it, the Synthroid or thyroid medication. And the other one is Coumadin, which is a blood thinner. And so sometimes it makes sense and it's better if you stick with the brand name, or at least if you have a generic, have it be from the same drug maker. But the problem is that if you use a pharmacy, 1 month they might have a deal from this generic maker, and the next month they might have a better deal from another generic maker. And so when they switch around, sometimes it's hard for you to have a consistent same medication. So those are the two at top of mind: the Synthroid for thyroid, and also the blood thinner Coumadin.
Yes. Now, if you have managed to stick around through all of the technical difficulties, the audio difficulties, or what have you, we feel like giving you a gold star. So just drop a "I'm still here" in the chat so we can know you're still here, so we can give you a fist bump because we appreciate you for coming and staying. Ellis, any final remarks from you?
No, I would think I'm going to kind of reiterate what I said earlier about as a consumer of healthcare services, um, increase your health literacy. And that's what blackdoctor.org is doing. That's what we're here for. Go to our site. If your doctor says you have something, there's a host of medical conditions on our site that you can go read about, and we're going to give you the culturally competent way. We're going to give you and explain it to you. And so when you go back into the office, you have some general health literacy about that condition. The other thing is that I agree with Dr. Marshall. We need more Black doctors. Right? We understand the research, the studies, everything that shows that Black patients do better when they have Black doctors. We need to at least match our population percentage. And so we're at 3 to 5% right now in terms of Black doctors. We need to get that up to 12, 13% to match our population to be able to adequately serve our population. We understand that court decision by the Supreme Court does impact that somewhat. And I'm going to say somewhat because, as we know, there are 4 historically Black medical schools, and there's another one. I think Xavier has now opened up one as well. So now we're at 5. There was more than that at one point, but as you can see, we're starting to get back into that space. And then there's some promising results showing that some schools are rejecting that kind of legacy admission process. And so there's a possibility or probability. What's important for us to do is identify those children at an early age that are showing a proficiency in STEM studies and protect them and give them the village that they need to get them all the way through medical school. So that's an important kind of cog of it. But I know I've said a lot, but please increase your health literacy. Go to blackdoctor.org to do that, and also identify those kids and encourage them, those STEM kids of color, to do what they need to do to get them through medical school.
Excellent point. I just want to thank Dr. Marshall, author of Dismissed, Tackling the Biases That Undermine Our Healthcare, that was released in March, if I recall correctly, for joining us. Thank you for sharing the work that you've been doing and telling us why this is relevant for us to really be able to use our voice and champion for ourselves, not be concerned about being the angry Black woman or the angry Black man, because your health requires that you really champion for it. So thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for continuing to listen in. Thank you, Ellis. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. We definitely want to have you back when we have no audio difficulty. So consider yourself invited back. We'll get you back up on my calendar. I want to give a special shout out to one of my very favorite PR persons, Miss Dr. Pam Perry, who connected us with Dr. Marshall. And I want to remind you all that we are here. I'm Not Crazy, but same time, same place, every Thursday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time and 12 to 1 Eastern Time. I will see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Go to AngelaMarshallMD.com to get the book. Get your book, Dismissed. Go and get your book. See y'all next time.
Look at Dr. Perry. She is on it. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having